Even the British talked about the fact that how could this have happened? It must have been something supernatural. They recognized, and they could have ended it all. It would have ended. They could have hung George Washington. And the challenge here is that there is many events like that have been documented, but they've been forgotten. And here we're coming up, Frank, to the 250th anniversary of our nation. And so this film is very significant for right now because it's a reminder of God acting in our history.
August 29th, 1776, General George Washington and his army are trapped in Brooklyn by the Brits. It was the Battle of Long Island. The Brits had pushed Washington right up against the East River, and they had stopped their pursuit of Washington and decided they would finish him off the next day. What happened that night is hard to explain without divine providence, because somehow Washington and his 9,000 men escaped over the East River in the wee hours of August 29th across to Manhattan, and the British didn't know it until he had crossed over. How did he do it? Did God have anything to do with it? And what about the several other coincidences that occurred during the American Revolution that are really hard to explain without some kind of divine intervention? We're going to talk about it today, and you're going to be able to see it in about 10 days on the big screen. It's called The American Miracle, a brand new movie co-written and directed by my guest today, who's been on the program several times before because he does great movies. His name is Timothy Mahoney. Here he is, ladies and gentlemen, with his new, I got to call this a docu-drama, Tim, because it is a documentary, but it's also a movie as well, because you're acting out what happened in addition to having scholars intervene. First of all, why did you decide to do this movie? How did you even get involved with it?
Well, I had been, as you know, making this series of films called Patterns of Evidence, and was working in that area for literally 25 years now, showing evidence of God acting in history. And as you know, Frank, a pattern of evidence is a scientific approach. And that's when you're looking to see, okay, can we find evidence of God acting in history? Well, what does the Bible say happened, and can I find a pattern for that? And along the way, in the very first film, Michael Medved, who a number of people know, he's a radio talk show host and author. He was actually, I think, at Sneak Peeks on PBS, film critic. He had been in that first film, in the Exodus, and what happened was he had written a book called The American Miracle, and it was a New York Times best-selling book, and he called me and said, would you help me turn this book into a series of movies? And I have to tell you, Frank, I was intimidated at first. I didn't know. This is such a big undertaking to tell this great historical story of God's providence, his acting in our history. But I could see the connection between the God acting in history in the during the time of the Exodus and the Bible. Well, God's been acting in history throughout all these centuries, and I was now just moving the lens into the founding of our country, and that's how this all came about.
In fact, in the very first scene or two of the movie, again, the movie's called The American Miracle. It's AmericanMiracleMovie.com, AmericanMiracleMovie.com. We'll tell you about when you can see it and where in a few minutes. But you explain the difference between a miracle, a literal miracle, where God overpowers a natural law, and divine providence. What is the difference? What is divine providence as opposed to an overpowering of a natural law, Tim?
Well, I think in some cases they are similar because in one way, God is the author of everything. If we believe from nothing He creates, He created the universe, He created us. We were made in the image of God, and so what this film is saying is that the founders recognize that something unnatural was happening. And Providence is, I think, a word that was universally used because they were from many different denominations. They were Puritans and they were Baptists and Methodists, and there's lots of different kinds of denominations in the early colonies, Catholics, and they had to use a word that would work for talking about God. And Washington used the word, and so did the other founders, providence, which means the presence of God. They saw the presence of God acting in battles. And you brought up the crossing of the East River. What happened was amazing because Washington and the Continental Army were routed. Of course they would be routed. They were against the mightiest navy and army of the world. And these were just people from farms and shopkeepers that didn't have any official training, and they were trying to stand the line against thousands of soldiers. And if you read the incidences of when they surrendered, the British executed them. So Washington was trapped at the end of this when they invaded New York. He tried to protect it, but with the fleet and everything, he couldn't. And but that night, it rained, and there's this unusual thing. Washington had an idea to evacuate, to get everyone there, but there were British ships in the river, and they would have seen them and blown them out of the water. But a fog appears out of nowhere and covers that area where Washington was, so they couldn't see, and the river, miraculously protecting the retreat of Washington and the Continental soldiers. It wasn't the time of year for a fog. It came out of nowhere.
Yeah, it was August 29th. I just did a search on this to try and see how common is fog in Brooklyn, New York. How common is it in late August? And it's not common at all. If it happens, it might happen October, November, or say March, April, when the seasons are transitioning. It's not common anyway to get fog in Brooklyn on August 29th and get it in Brooklyn and not in Manhattan. I mean, it covered the area of Brooklyn that Washington and his men were in and covered part of the East River. But when they got over to Manhattan, it was clear as a bell. And so these men were protected by what we call divine providence. Did God overpower a natural law to bring fog to New York or to Brooklyn? He didn't have to. He could have just used natural laws to do so. But it was very odd and very coincidental that it happened at this time, just in this spot, to protect Washington's army. If Washington had been routed and his 9,000 men had been executed, that would have been the end of the American Revolution in 1776. And people don't realize, when we think about it today, you said that the Brits would execute the Americans because the Americans were seen as traitors. This was treason. They were rebelling against King George. And that's why people today don't understand that these men were hunted down in their own homes. Their homes were burned down. They were taken prisoner, some of them, and put on awful prison ships. Others were executed, as you mentioned. This was war, and you had to choose your sides carefully, because if you weren't on the right side of the Brits and they caught you, it was curtains for you. And
yeah, absolutely. And when we think about this, when that escape happened, even the British talked about the fact that how could this have happened? It must have been something supernatural. They recognized, and they could have ended it all. It would have ended. They could have hung George Washington. And the challenge here is that there is many events like that have been documented, but they've been forgotten. And here we're coming up, Frank, to the 250th anniversary of our nation. And so this film is very significant for right now because it's a reminder of God acting in our history. In fact, Michael wrote 2 books, and there's story after story after story of these unusual coincidences that some people would say. But they're actually, you can look and say, well, was it a coincidence? Or was it God?
Yeah, you're going to see it on the big screen beginning June 9th for 2 or 3 nights. We'll give you the details. It's AmericanMiracleMovie.com. A lot more with Tim Mahoney, the director and co-writer of this brand new movie you're going to want to see. Don't go anywhere. Back after the break. Welcome back to I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist with me, Frank Turek, on radio stations around the country. It's also a podcast. It's called the I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist podcast. My guest today, Tim Mahoney, filmmaker who's made some great films. If you look up Patterns of Evidence, go to his website, Patterns of Evidence. We've had Tim on for the movies that he's put together on the Exodus. When was the Exodus? And what evidence do we have for the Exodus? You should check those movies out. They're on Patterns of Evidence. Is the website patternsofevidence.com, Tim?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay, patternsofevidence.com. But today we're talking about a movie about American history. It's called The American Miracle, and the website, AmericanMiracleMovie.com. Tim, it's going to be in theaters June 9th, 10th, and 11th. Did I hear that right?
That's correct, yep.
Okay. And how do people go see it? What do they have to do?
Well, if they go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, they can put their zip code in. There's a place to buy tickets, and they can put in the zip code and their city, and that will tell them the theater. We're in over 800 theaters, and that'll give them the address. And they should buy tickets now because this is a limited engagement right now. We want to fill the theaters so that this story can continue. But right now they need to buy their tickets in advance. So there's a certain urgency. If you want to see movies like this one is an amazing film. We're getting all sorts of endorsements. This is an important film. And so go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com and get your tickets and invite your friends and family, everyone.
Yeah, this kind of history isn't taught in schools anymore, ladies and gentlemen, but it should be. And this reminds me of Brave Books. The folks, our friends at Brave Books, they put together little books for kids on biblical values and the truth of the Bible and American history. That's kind of what you're doing here on the big screen, Tim. People are going to get to see American history told in a proper manner. You're going to see all the way. I mean, you go back into Washington George Washington from about, say, 1750 or so. You kind of trace his life right up through the Constitution. What are some of the events that occurred in Washington's life early on that you show in the film, Tim, that people need to know about?
Well, George Washington was considered obviously the greatest leader at that time, but what caused him to become that? Well, when he was a young boy, his father actually passed away. And so he was without a father, but he had an older brother. And his older brother got sick. He got tuberculosis, I think, and he had to go to Barbados, to get better weather for his tuberculosis. And there, Washington got smallpox. And a lot of people, when they got smallpox, would die, but Washington survived, and which was in some ways miraculous. And because of that, he had an immunity to smallpox, which later on, when there was an epidemic, he was protected from that. And he comes back, and he gets asked, he was a surveyor, and he gets asked to go on a mission to send a letter to the French who were building forts in a territory that was disputed. And so Washington goes to take that letter to those forts, and he ends up having, on the way back, an Indian guide try to murder him at point blank, and somehow the shot misses Washington. And he is saved, and then later they're trying to escape because now they know that the natives are after them, and they're trying to cross an icy river, and he ends up slipping and falling into this icy river in freezing weather, and has to spend the night on an island. And it was so cold that the river actually froze the next morning and they escaped. And Washington wrote all this down, and his sort of, it was printed about this young man who survived death twice. And then what happens is that he goes along with General Braddock, a British officer, and a large contingent. I think it was like 5,000 to 7,000 British that go to this fort. And on the way there, they are surrounded and attacked by the French and a group of Native Americans who wipe out almost every officer except for one. And it was George Washington. And he had like 4 bullet holes through his coat. His hat was shot off. 2 horses were shot out from under him. And he survived. And once again, that people could see that there's something supernaturally protecting George Washington. And later on, as the movie shows, there's a Native American who is a chief, and he testifies. He comes to Washington later and testifies. He says, "We tried to shoot you, but we couldn't." Mm-hmm. And he said, "There's a hand that is protecting you, and you will be the leader of a great nation."
Yeah, you show all this in the movie, and if I remember correctly, the situation with General Braddock, there were 31 officers on horseback. 30 of them were killed. And the only one that wasn't was George Washington. And he's right in the middle of all this. And as you said, he has these bullet holes going through his coat, and he's unhurt. How does all this happen? This is been recorded. It's recorded at the time, ladies and gentlemen. This is long before there's an American Revolution, by the way. So it's not some sort of propaganda where people are trying to pump up George Washington. This was recorded before the revolution ever began.
Right.
And Washington, if I remember correctly, was 6'4", which was, he's tall now, but it's very tall at that time. He stood out. He'd be a hard guy to miss on horseback. Right. And somehow they keep missing. Why does this happen? Is it just coincidence, or is there providence? Is there a divine hand behind it? And that's what this movie shows. Again, friends, the movie is called American Miracle. Go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com. And why don't I know this is radio for some, but I'd like to show the 2-minute trailer if we could. For those of you listening on radio, if you go to our Cross-Examined YouTube channel, all of these podcasts are in video as well. You can see the trailer as we're going to show it right now. It's 1 minute and 53 seconds. You'll hear it, but those watching on video will actually see it. Here it is. Let's take a look.
I came to persuade you to avoid these dangers.
We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal.
If our union is to hold together, something must be done.
He will become founder of a mighty empire.
The fate of unborn millions now depends under God upon the conduct and courage of this army.
Various founders talked about this providential experiment that God had ordained and intervened at this unique moment in American history to make all of this happen.
Most of them believed that there were no accidents in history.
That hope for liberty was the light that under God, He would lead them.
All eyes are open or opening to the rights of man.
Am I all mankind?
We have been assured, sir, in the sacred writings, that except the Lord build the house, they labor in vain that build it.
It cannot be denied that with America and in America, a new era commences in human affairs.
America is something that I hold in my heart.
Americans of today should regain our bearings, that our nation is no accident.
That's the American Miracle, the movie, ladies and gentlemen. That's the trailer for it. My guest today is Tim Mahoney, who is the director and also the co-writer of that movie. It comes to theaters June 9, 10, and 11. If you go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, AmericanMiracleMovie.com, you can see where it is. Put your zip code in there. Tim, who are some of the actors that you have in this movie?
Well, we have Pat Boone is playing Thomas Jefferson, and he's playing the Thomas Jefferson the older.
He actually looks like Thomas Jefferson in
this
movie. He does, yeah.
He's great, and I think there's some divine providence in the selecting of our actors. And then I asked Kevin Sorbo if he would help me. He's a friend, he grew up in Minnesota as well, and he helped us in our Exodus film as a narrator. And Kevin plays Thomas Jefferson the younger. And this is a series of films, so we'll see Kevin again, and I believe we're going to make the next films about this, but he plays. And then we've got Nicole C. Mullen, the gospel singer, and she's playing a person by the name of Elizabeth Mumbet Freeman. Her name was Mumbet in the beginning, but she takes, during the Revolution, people don't realize that there are messages or themes right here saying that the founders were in favor of slavery. Well, they weren't. They were trying to get rid of it. Some were, but there was a movement to try to end slavery. And Mumbet Freeman is sort of the beginning of a case in Massachusetts that basically she takes and she wins her freedom, and that begins a movement in the states. And so that's the story we're telling. We're not leaving any. We're not sort of leaving it unvarnished. We're not telling only one side of a story. We're telling the story of the battles, but God's providence, and then what did this winning the revolution lead to was the formation of a constitution. And we're going to tell the story of that, and the whole issue of slavery is in this movie. We've got Cameron Arnett, who people might remember just recently in the movie The Forge, and he is playing Peter Salem, a hero at the Battle of Bunker Hill. And there's so many stars that Libby Smallbone, the little sister of the King and Country, and Rebecca St. James, she's playing a woman who is taken to trial for actually whacking Nicole C. Mullins playing Mumbet with a hot shovel from a fire. And we're telling all of those stories. And we've just got some tremendous actors. It's a cast of about 90 actors with about 300 plus extras. And we had a film historian who worked on the movie Turn. He worked with Spielberg on Lincoln. He did the John Adams series, and James Gallagher helped me get everything as accurate as we possibly could. Frank, we actually filmed at Mount Vernon. We filmed in, where Washington lived. We filmed in his house and at his desk. Daniel Shippey is our George Washington. He's a tremendous George Washington, studies him, and did a great performance. So it's been a fantastic experience making and retelling this story of God's providential hand on America.
And there are some scholars in it. Some we'll tell you about right after the break. You're listening to I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. My guest, Tim Mahoney, the movie, The American Miracle, AmericanMiracleMovie.com, June 9th to the 11th in theaters. Check it out. Back after the break. Ladies and gentlemen, those listening on the American Family Radio Network, going to be in Tupelo, Mississippi next weekend for the AFA Activate Summit. That is the 13th of June. It's all day. I'll be there with several other speakers. Go to our website or their website, American Family Association, for more on that. Also want to mention that CIA is coming up, the Cross-Examine Instructor Academy. That's going to be July 31st to August 2nd. If you want to learn how to better present the evidence for Christianity and answer questions, you got to come to CIA. I think we only have 1 or 2 presenter spots left. We do have non-presenter spots left. You got to apply. Go to crossexamine.org, click on events. You will see it there. Let me get back to my guest, Timothy Mahoney. He has done this brand new movie. It is really well done. You're going to love it. It's called AmericanMiracleMovie.com. That's where you go. The title of the movie is The American Miracle. And it's pointing out how God's providence, whether he overpowered a natural law or not, somehow he appeared to have his hand in what happened over, say, 40 or 50 years, right through George Washington's early life, all the way through the American Revolution and the writing of the Constitution. And you see these events portrayed in this movie, and it's a docu-drama, Tim, because you have my friend Stephen Meyer in it. You also have the Princeton scholar Robbie George in it. You have the gentleman Paul Kengor. Do I have that name right?
Yes, that's correct. Yep. Grove City College, Paul Kengor.
Yeah, and he has written several biographies of American presidents. You have Richard Dreyfuss in it, the Academy Award winner. Why was Dreyfuss in this movie?
Well, he's an Academy Award winner, and but his concern is the fact that we no longer teach civics in America. For the last 50 or 60 years, that class has ceased to exist. And he believes, and I think he's correct, that we don't have people that understand civics and how to be civil. And what has happened is now they're doing surveys of college students. Even last year, 3,500 college students were surveyed, and 70% of those students would not pass a citizenship test.
Wow.
They wouldn't be able to pass the exam. And even Americans today, they don't really know anything about our nation or how it works, what the fundamentals are. They don't know about the Constitution. And so we have a great ignorance and probably even apathy.
We do. And I remember somebody asking Dr. Geisler, what's the greatest problem in America today? Is it ignorance or apathy? And he said, I don't know and I don't care. But think about it. These people are supposed to be college trained. You know what they're not getting? They're not getting truth, Tim. They're getting ideology. They're getting leftist Marxist ideology, and they come out of there as little Marxists. And when they get into the real world, a lot of them start to realize, Marxism really doesn't work. I need to work hard and make a living. And this idea that everybody gets the same doesn't work with human nature. And you point out in this movie, the American miracle, that when the founders came together to create the Constitution, they knew there had to be checks and balances in the Constitution because of human nature. Can you unpack that a little bit for us?
Absolutely. And Dr. Stephen Meyer from the Discovery Institute, who's been a friend of mine for 20 years, he brought this. He said the founders had two pillars. They understood that there was, that they looked at the book of Genesis, and Robert George also tells us about this, that they saw that man was created in the image of God. And I think in the Declaration of Independence, there's certain rights that they are endowed by our Creator. Life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. So they could see there's a divine part of who humans are. But the second part is there's the depravity, the fall of man. They also saw that in the book of Genesis, is that people had a fallen nature. So they had to find a way to protect both of these pillars, to understand that they had to exist in this Constitution, so that, and the whole point of this Constitution was that they could see the dignity of man and know that you had to be careful because people are fallen and they would abuse other people. That's why they had the separation of powers in the government. And so that's what this film is unpacking for a lot of people. And it's simple and it's entertaining. And the conflict in Constitutional Hall, when Independence Hall, when they were basically doing this, is fantastic. The drama that is there, and then deism. Benjamin Franklin was considered a deist, but Robert George will refute that from Princeton. And I believe that this has been an exaggeration. When I've started to read and study these founders, they believed in God and they believed in prayer. And they believed in the presence of God, the providence of God. It's in their writings. So we've been given a narrative that I think is absolutely false about these founders. Mm-hmm. And that's what this film is exposing.
Yeah, you had, of course, Jefferson. That great prayer was well done. Who is the guy? Not Jefferson, Franklin. Who was the guy playing Franklin? Man, he looked just like him.
Yes, and I should know his name, but I've got about 890 actors.
You don't have to worry about it. He was good.
Barry Stevens. Barry Stevens.
Okay.
He's fantastic.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, that prayer scene was very well done when he stood up there at the Constitutional Convention and gave that famous prayer. He obviously, maybe he had deist leanings, but his prayer wasn't a deist prayer. And by the way, ladies and gentlemen, the Declaration of Independence is not a deist document, because you have a... Here's how it ends. This is the Declaration of Independence. We, therefore, the representatives of the United States of America in General Congress assembled, appealing to the Supreme Judge of the world for the rectitude of our intentions, do in the name and by the authority of the good people of these colonies, easy for me to say, solemnly publish and declare that these colonies are and of right ought to be free and independent states, that they are absolved from all allegiance to the British crown, and that all political connection between them and the state of Great Britain is and ought to be totally dissolved. And that, as free and independent states, they have the full power to levy war, conclude peace, contract alliances, establish commerce, and do all other acts and things which independent states may of right do. And, here it is, for the support of this declaration, with a firm reliance on the protection of divine providence, there's that word, divine providence, we mutually pledge to each other our lives, our fortunes, and our sacred honor. That is not a deist document. You have the supreme judge of the world. Deists don't believe that God cares what goes on here. They're appealing to divine providence for protection. Deists don't believe that God gets involved protecting people. And they're appealing based on his moral law. They say earlier that we submit these facts to a candid world. You're pointing out here, Tim, in this movie, again, the movie's called The American Miracle, AmericanMiracleMovie.com, June 9, 10, and 11 in theaters near you. You show that these men, even though some of them may have deist leanings, they did not express deist thoughts in any of the documents, did they?
No, and I'm not a historian, I'm a filmmaker, but after several years of examining this and seeing it, I've been frustrated by what has happened earlier, realizing that that was a narrative that was tried to put on top of them. Mm-hmm. And, Benjamin Franklin was a part of the Great Awakening. He was friends with George Whitefield. He published his sermons. Benjamin Franklin, in his writings to his family, talked about prayer and the fact that he believed in prayer. And he thought that prayer was an important thing to do. And so this film is, countering a lot of these, and I would probably say, false narratives about our nation. And the film's subtitle is Our Nation is No Accident. And the focus there is that we were created as a nation, and Paul Kengor and others talk about this. The nation has been a light to many. Why do so many people want to come here? It's because its principles are based, I believe, on biblical understandings of man, and they created a constitution that people around the world, it's like a light to the world. They want to be here because it frees them to do what they want to do. They don't have that in oppressive other parts of the world. The other thing is that this nation, I think, still has a purpose, but you can't eliminate God from it. Freedom of, this whole idea of freedom of religion, it's not mean freedom of God. It was church. There were churches. They didn't want the Anglican church or a Baptist church or the Puritans to control the government, but they didn't mean that God wouldn't be a part of it. And it's in their writings all throughout our history. So this whole idea of the film has a warning in it. And the warning is not to eliminate God from our nation. And the founders recognized the providence and the hand of God in what they were doing. And if it wasn't for that, we wouldn't be here. I don't know what we would be, but we wouldn't be the United States of America.
Yeah, if you dispense with God, you dispense with rights, because rights come from God. And that's what our Declaration says. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created and endowed by their government. No, it doesn't say that. It says endowed by their creator with certain inalienable rights. Yeah. Among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. And it goes on to say, and governments are instituted among men to secure these rights. The problem was King George was not securing the rights of the colonists, and that's why they declared their independence. So without God, there are no rights. And so people trying to throw God out of America are also throwing rights out with America, the justification for them anyway. They just don't realize that. And that's a huge problem. And this movie is going to be a corrective to that if it's viewed with an open mind. That's the problem. You got a lot of people out there and aren't open about this.
Well, it's historically accurate. I can tell you that. I mean, it's gone through the vetting process, and what you're going to be seeing, everything from, the Native Americans we have in the Battle of Monongahela are the descendants of the Native Americans that were in the battle. The clothing, the uniforms, many of the words are coming out of documents. So this film, in every capacity, is trying to give you both historically what things look like, as well as the real truth of what it is. Now, people can say, well, I don't know that all these things that happen, were God acting. We have some people saying that. But you'd say, well, how is it that coincidence after coincidence after coincidence? Robert George says that.
Yeah.
And the founders believed that God was working on their behalf. And the British also could see that. They started to realize that something more was going on here.
Yeah, in fact, the wind direction with regard to Washington's escape from Brooklyn in August of 1776 was critical, because if the wind was different, they would have blockaded the East River. They couldn't get up the East River, the Brits. Remember, the Brits had a navy. We didn't have a navy. We couldn't do anything on the water. We had these little rowboats that Washington took 9,000 men across the East River on August 29th. If he hadn't have done that under the cover of fog, we wouldn't have had this country. A lot more with Tim Mahoney of the brand new movie, The American Miracle. Go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com. We're back after the break. Welcome back to I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. My guest, Tim Mahoney. The brand new movie called The American Miracle hits theaters June 9, 10, and 11. Get your tickets now. Go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com. You're going to want to see this. You're going to bring your kids to see it. It's going to give you an accurate portrayal of what happened in the founding of this nation. By the way, I want to say one other thing, Tim, that your movie addresses that very few do. Just parenthetically, the three-fifths clause in the Constitution, which says essentially, a lot of people thought it meant that slaves were only worth 3/5 of a person, and that's what the famed Dred Scott, a dreadful judgment court case that was made later in our nation to keep slavery in place. People don't understand what had to take place for the nation to come together is they had to somehow find a compromise between the northern states who had abolished slavery and the southern states who wanted to keep it. And the southern states wanted to count every single slave as a voter so they would get more representation in Congress and keep slavery in place. And of course, the northern states are saying, no, don't count those people because we want to get rid of slavery. If you count them, you're going to be able to outvote them. And people don't realize that. And your movie, The American Miracle, points this out. Was this in Medved's book? Did Stephen Meyer clarify this? How did this come into this movie, Tim?
Well, I knew that this would be a problem to dealing with the whole slavery question with the founders, because many people say, well, Joseph Ellis, the two-time Pulitzer Prize winner, talked about that there's a group of people that are saying that the founders wanted to have slavery. And that's not true. Some founders wanted it because they had built their economics on slavery. But what had happened was there was a great movement, but they knew that if they didn't have a way to compromise to get all the states in, either some other country would come in, whether it would be the Dutch or the British again, and they would come and establish a beachhead, and then there'd be another war. They had to get a solid alliance all the way across all the states. So that 3/5 clause has been used by people today to say that the founders didn't believe that they were a full person. But that's not what it meant. And we have Akil Reed Amar from Yale who's an incredible legal scholar explaining this, because he thought about that understanding, but it's not what it means at all. And it's really been helpful. We've had a lot of African-American pastors who have seen this movie and just love it. They had no idea, number one, of God's providence in America, nor of the participation of African-American, people involved with it in this battle. Now, Robert George says something really important, is that the Constitution, there are times in our history where we have been bad. We have not been good people. We have treated people wrongly. And it's not because the Constitution was bad. It's because people are fallen and have a sinful nature. And they have not followed the rule and the outline of the Constitution. So the nation is good. And I think the way this film is important right now, our nation is no accident, is that people, we don't realize that we're in American Revolution right now. We're one generation away from throwing away an incredible gift of this nation. And Richard Dreyfuss talks about this. He says, if we don't return to the love of our country, this nation will not look like anything that it was supposed to be. And that's why this film is a warning. I want people to see this film. You'll be inspired. It'll be educational. If you go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, I want you to buy tickets today, because it's important that this film gets out. Once you see it, you will see why it's so significant and important for people to see this, because it's going to give you the education that most of us never got. Yeah, but it's going to be entertaining, right? Right, Frank?
Right. That's right. And you're probably listening to this on June 6th or 7th or maybe the 8th. Well, it's only in theaters the 9th, the 10th, and the 11th of June. So buy your tickets now. Go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com and you will see it there. You also see trailers there. You'll see interviews there. You can learn more about the movie right there. You're going to want to do it. Because there's been so much misinformation about our founding, and this movie uses primary source material to show you what actually did happen and how there's some sort of divine providence going on. You can't explain all these things by coincidence. In fact, one of the most amazing things, the movie starts talking about this. I mean, this is a huge coincidence that both Jefferson and Adams die exactly 50 years after the Declaration of Independence. The same day, July 4th, 1826, they die. I mean, that's what is it, 50 million to 1, you say in the movie, right?
Yeah, that's the probability of that happening. Yeah.
Now you said during the break, Tim, that you were honored to make this movie. How so? What do you mean?
Well, when I was able to, stand in George Washington's home, in his office, and I remember filming a scene at his desk with Dan Chippy, who plays George Washington, and you realize, not everybody gets an opportunity to do this. I've been given an opportunity to tell stories of the Bible, of the Exodus, and of the writing of Hebrew, and so many things, the Red Sea miracle, Journey to Mount Sinai, and now here I am telling the American story. The testimony. The Bible is a testament. It's a testimony. It's a book of testimonies. And now we're telling another testimony. We're telling the testimony of God acting in the history of America. And I think we need to be reminded that God has acted. This is a forgotten story. And we're bringing it back to encourage people at this time. We're coming up to the 250th anniversary. And I think this film, my belief is that it's going to inspire people and it's going to give people courage. And they're going to know that I need to be responsible as a citizen. It told me I need to be a citizen. I can't just live on all the fruit of other people's lives from the past and just not care. I need to be a participant and be a citizen of this nation, or else we're going to lose it. And we're in a critical place where people need to basically be a part of this. Just as these shopkeepers and farmers and the founders all were participants in God acting in history. Well, we live at this time now, and we need to participate in our nations, whatever that might look like.
We do. And when we talk about American exceptionalism, that sounds like a lot of hubris. But when you hear that phrase and you think it's prideful, you're misunderstanding the meaning of American exceptionalism. We don't mean that the people of America are any better or worse than anybody else, although we do have some exceptional people, quite obviously. What we mean is the form of government is exceptional. You don't find this anywhere else. You don't find this kind of republic with checks and balances that has survived this long, even through a civil war. You don't find this where the people, their rights are enshrined as bulwarks against an overbearing government. That the Bill of Rights, ladies and gentlemen, is to protect you, the citizen, from the government. You don't find this elsewhere. Previous to this republic, you would either find monarchies where, the king was law, whatever he said went. You'd find theocracies. You might find some secular governments, but you don't find the perfect blend of a theistic government that provides the justification for the rights of the individual with also allowing for religious freedom. You don't find that anywhere else, Tim. This is exceptional, and that's what this movie points out.
Absolutely. And that's why, we keep repeating this, but if you go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, you can find where the theater is, and you can buy tickets right now and invite as many people as you can. This is just a short window. The time is running out. This is a short window to see this movie, and it should be seen. It's an incredibly beautiful, powerful, epic film. People have used the word epic. It's really an epic. A lot of drama, but you're going to get the why with some of these scholars that are going to tell you something deeper than you'd get if it was just a drama. You're going to understand the how it happened and the significance of it to us today.
Yeah, and as I say, Dr. Stephen Meyer, who's been on this program several times before, is in it. Professor Robert George from Princeton is in it. You have Paul Kengor, who's in it. You have Richard Dreyfuss, who's in it. You have a couple of other guys I didn't know, but who were very cogent and gave some good insights as to what happened and why. So you're not only going to be entertained, you're also going to learn. And you're going to learn the true founding of our nation. Go ahead, Tim. You wanted to leave.
I was going to say Dr. Ben Carson is behind this film. And,
good.
And Larry Arns just gave us a endorsement from Hillsdale College. So we've just had a lot of great endorsements. And once again, this film is a part of a series of bringing back the forgotten history of God acting in our nation. And so this is a significant milestone that we've reached. 250th year of our existence from the Declaration, and we're so happy to be able to have it and to bring it out, and we want to make a big deal of it. And that's the reason why, once again, we're telling people go to Patterns of no, that's my other film. go to American Miracle Movie. Yeah, AmericanMiracleMovie.com. And this is actually a Patterns of Evidence Foundation film. So we have donors, and that's how this film came to be.
And friends, there's no bad language, there's no sex, there's no gore. And in fact, that's one thing that, the battle scenes could have been more bloody. You didn't make them more bloody, but they're accurate. What happened, and right. So go to AmericanMiracleMovie.com, ladies and gentlemen. Again, June 9, 10, 11. Those are the only days you can see it in the theater. You're going to want to see it in the theater because it's as you said, epic. There's a lot of stuff going on. There's a lot of big scenes. And you're going to learn a lot, so bring your kids. Tim, it's always wonderful having you on. Thank you so much for doing this.
Well, thank you, Frank, again. It's I really love what you're doing, and keep cross-examining, right?
That's right. That's what we're doing, brother. All right, that's Tim Mahoney, ladies and gentlemen. AmericanMiracleMovie.com, June 9, 10, and 11. Go see it. Bring your kids. Support this. There'll be more movies coming if you support it. All right, God bless. We'll see you next time.
If you're looking for solid answers to life's biggest questions, don't miss the latest episode of I Don't Have Enough Faith to Be an Atheist. Find it on Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Pandora, iHeart, OnePlace, and Podchaser. Tune in, discover the truth, and share it with someone who needs it. Let's keep spreading the truth together.